3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
and everywhere in between.
Welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation, to another episode. This one's an instant reaction coming off Penn State crushing Indiana 45-14. Should be a pretty quick one. I think our goal is to be like Geico, and in 15 minutes or less, you can learn everything you need to know about Penn State football. So right off the top, I think the first thing that we want to talk about, and I know Zach wants to talk about, let's talk about the defense. I have the stats right in front of me. Indiana held to 65 rushing yards on 34 carries. They had -6 rushing yards at halftime, which is insane. Overall, Indiana had 7 3-and-outs, 3 turnovers, averaged 3.3 yards per play, and Penn State's defense had 6 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, and 3 takeaways. So, Zach, I'll toss it over to you. How are you feeling about the defense against definitely a subpar Indiana offense?
Yeah, it felt like domination. You know, sometimes you see these types of games where there's a big time statistical difference in terms of the numbers, and it might be strategy or scheming or whatever. And then there's other games where it just from the jump it feels like physical domination. You know, the Michigan game is a good example going the other way. It felt like from that first series, the Penn State defensive front was just going to annihilate whichever quarterback Indiana was going to play. I know they've definitely had some struggles across the offensive line this year, and that was really evident today. And like we've talked about on our end of things, when the offensive line's not playing well, it's just really hard to play offense and to run the ball or throw the ball or do anything when you can't keep your quarterback upright and when you can't get a push. And for me, again, that first drive, it just seemed like the defensive front, especially, everybody was in the backfield. And Deven, we were just talking before we went on, you know, you got 6 sacks. You have 6 different guys recorded a sack. You had 16 and a half, I think, tackles for loss. And those were pretty evenly distributed across the board as well. So it's one of those things where not only are the starters pushing the Indiana offensive line around, you have the second string guys come in and they're also getting in the backfield. They're making sacks. They're pressuring the quarterback and denied Dennis Sutton with an interception. And it just seemed like everybody contributed. One guy, just if we're going to throw out a name, I guess one guy for me, I felt like Kobe King really popped for me today. He looked really athletic and rangy. And so I don't know. I think Elsdon went down early. I'm not sure if Elsdon came back at all. But it's hard to evaluate too in one of these games where you're emptying the bench really early. So you were seeing a lot of different players that maybe wouldn't normally get that many minutes. And we're seeing combinations of players out in the field that we typically don't see, but that's a good problem to have. And it's a good thing to know that you can dip into the bench a little bit deeper than maybe normal and still against an opponent of this type of caliber, still have a pretty good day.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. Like you said, I think DDS had a really solid game. He looks so athletic, and that interception, I mean, for like a split second, I thought he was going to return it all the way because he looked like an athletic guy being for how big he is. I think Nick Tarburton had another really solid game. He made a couple mistakes, that one offsides that gave them their first touchdown, but he was in the backfield a lot. And then just one other name that I thought really stood out on defense was Isaac. I thought this was his best game of the season. I forget off the top of my head how many. He had 2 tackles for loss, but I felt like he had 2 or 3 more that he almost had. So it's good that he's kind of getting back into full swing, and we need him moving forward because, like you said, a couple guys got banged up. Elsdon got banged up. Jacobs, I think, went out really early, and I don't remember him coming back. I felt like Elsdon came back, but definitely could be wrong. But Jacobs got dinged up too. And it's like you said, I mean, Indiana they just couldn't get anything going running wise. Obviously, I'm sure our pals Duncan and Blizzard Warning are going to let us know in the comments that we were completely wrong about the quarterbacks. Not sure how we missed that Bazalik wasn't going to play this game. I just Googled it and don't see anything, so I don't really understand what happened there. But once you got past Tuttle, who I thought Tuttle was pretty solid. I thought he looked like a pretty competent quarterback. Once we started to spy on him and not letting him get out of the pocket a little bit, and then obviously with the big injury, it was over from the moment that Tuttle got hurt. So overall, I think it was a pretty impressive defensive performance. Like we said, we didn't expect Indiana to really be in the game, And I think that's a good way for Penn State to feel headed into this last 3 games. Is we went into Bloomington, we completely dominated both sides of the ball, and now we have some momentum moving forward. So Zach, any other comments about Penn State's defense?
Yeah, just on the quarterback situation, I think you're right. I think Tuttle played fairly well given the uphill battle that they were going to have no matter what with the offensive line play. But what struck me as odd, and I don't know if you caught this, and maybe some of our commenters caught this as well. I'm pretty sure Orlovsky on the call said that it's already been announced or known that Tuttle is going to transfer this
Yeah,
offseason.
he did say that. That was weird.
And so and it gets back to your comment about we didn't really know about Connor Bazalek not playing. I get, late in the season, things aren't going well. Maybe you make a switch as our fans are clamoring for at quarterback to try to jumpstart something. But if that's the case, why are you wasting? I would have gone right to Dexter Williams. I think he's got some obvious flaws, but he gave them a nice little jump start there in the second half. And the passing game, he needs to get sharper in the passing game, but he can at least run and makes the zone read a completely different ball game for them. So the whole situation there in the quarterback room for Indiana, we don't cover Indiana, so we don't know. But the fact that if Orlovsky's correct, and that's no guarantee, why you would be starting a guy that is not going to be committed to your program beyond the next year, I don't get. But
yeah, I'm with you. That as soon as he said that, I thought that was one of the weirdest comments that I had ever heard from a commentator, being like, "This guy's already told him that he's transferring." But
right.
I mean, I guess
And
Indiana
has the good news is it's not even the weirdest thing that Orlovsky said on the call. So
yeah, and we will. That's a great tease, Zach. They call it a tease in the podcast business. So we're actually going to save that comment though for the third thing we're going to talk about. First, or second, technically, we need to talk about Kaytron Allen. Obviously, I think that we were very high on Singleton. I was very high on Singleton just because I knew him better and have seen him play in the mid-state a lot. Kaytron Allen from IMG Academy. I tweet today that kind of made sense. I think maybe Kaytron Allen was better prepared for playing Division I football than Nick Singleton because of the level of competition that they've played against, which hadn't really struck me until someone tweeted that, and it made sense to me. Obviously, this is not bashing Nick Singleton at all, because Singleton had 16 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. Thought he played really, really well, especially on Aller's first drive there in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, whenever that exactly was. Singleton played really well. Kaytron Allen, however, 18 carries, 86 yards, 2 receptions, 72 yards, and that one really impressive almost screen pass, just throwaway from Clifford that turns into a 50-yard run. And he had 3 rushing touchdowns. So, Zach, I'll kick it over to you. How you feeling about Kaytron Allen?
Yeah, I think he definitely was the star of the game. We've kind of, I think in the last couple of weeks of our recent podcast, we've started to hint, if not outright say, or at least I feel like I have anyway, that it's starting to feel like Allen has kind of proclaimed himself as the guy for Penn State. And I personally, I know you and I were talking about this today. I love, and it played itself out this way today, the idea that Allen he's the starter, he's the workhorse back, he's going to pound the rock. I think he had 14 carries in the first half, so he got a heavy workload. And then when the defense has started to tire out and their will is starting to get broken, Singleton in the second half is the guy that he's some of those long runs that we're hoping to see. I think that's the perfect setting for him to have those, is as sort of the change of pace speed back. And that's not to say I don't think, I think Allen should be getting 25 carries. And I just think that role works really well for both of them. And for whatever reason, and I'm guessing it may have to do with just the fact that almost the entire offensive line is out. It felt like Penn State went really, really vanilla with the run game today. Yes. I'm recalling the toss play out of the power T that we motioned out of on the goal line. We ran a toss play there. I'm struggling to come up with many other designed runs that I recall today where the design was, let's get the ball outside. And I'm thinking a lot of that is, again, you have Drew Shelton in there at tackle, true freshman. You have, Norzad goes out at the beginning of the game. You have Tangwell already out. You have Olu Fashanu is already out. So you're asking all of these backups and a lot of young guys to come in. And I think it was smart to basically, let's just run the ball and let's be very vanilla. Let's run our base stuff. If we can't push Indiana around, we're going to have trouble anyway. And so for me, I'm okay with that. But it would still be nice to see Singleton, like a recognition of what skill set he does have, and try to
Yeah.
put him in a position to utilize it. Maybe again, it didn't really matter in this game, but I think going forward, the goal is utilize both of these guys as much as you can in the way that's most effective for what they're good at and what they do.
Yeah, I'm with you completely, and I think you hit it on the head there. Is Singleton is so good in space, and he's so fast, and his cutting ability is just it's really impressive. And there's times where I think we just use the Allen and Singleton in positions that don't make sense, whereas running outside runs with Allen. Not saying that Allen's not fast. Don't misquote us in the comments, but I think Singleton is that speed guy, and like you said, if we can find a perfect rotation with them, and I love the fact that they got 18 and 16, and it feels like every week they're in that neighborhood of both of them are right around 15 to 18 carries, and that's what we were calling for at the beginning of the year. And even though, I mean, you look at the numbers, and we did only rush for 179 yards, it felt like a lot more, and we had so many short fields. We had a couple of those turnovers. Indiana just went 3 and out every time. So we weren't trying, we didn't need 80 and 90-yard drives, even though we did have 2 90-yard drives. Most of our drives were starting around midfield or in the 40 area. So the numbers don't look great if you just look at the box score, but we completely controlled the line of scrimmage. And I think that you hit on it too, that maybe we should talk about this while we're right here. There's got to be some concern with all the offensive line injuries, but it's almost positive that we were able to run so well today with so many backups like you listed. And I know you're better at naming the offensive linemen. I mean, I could name them if I had to, but missing Fashanu and Tangwall especially, I think our 2 best linemen. Would you say that? I think those are our 2 best linemen probably. Juice Scruggs is in
I
there.
think so. I mean, it's been a few weeks since we've seen Tangwall, but I felt like he was really starting to play at a high level when he went out.
Right. So missing all those guys and going with backups, like Effner and what's the Nelson, the transfer.
JB Nelson was playing guard.
Yeah. So I mean, getting those guys in, our whole left side of the line was completely different than it had been 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. But still to be able to run the ball, average almost 4 yards a carry, it's got to be pretty pleasing headed into Maryland, where we're going to have to run the ball, I think, too.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit it on the head too. The rushing yards doesn't stand out as glamorous or sexy. You know, we didn't have any 80-yard runs, but for me, and maybe I'm just sort of like an old school Big Ten 3 yards in a cloud of dust guy. I felt like we were getting 4 or 5 yards every play. Yep. And as much as it'd be nice to say we had 4 or 5 long explosive run plays sprinkled in there, and we should want those. The fact that we didn't have them and we still put up those rushing yards tells you that it was just a very consistent plod your way down the field in the running game. And that, again, with all the backups that we just went through, I think that's all you can ask for. Is we don't need gaudy stats. We don't need sexy runs. Can we get a good push, fall forward? And I felt like one thing, and to Singleton's credit, I saw a lot of this in the second half. The running backs were falling forward. There was a number of plays where not just Allen, but even Singleton, there's a play I can recall in the second half where he just ran a safety over, just lowered his shoulder and ran him over. And that's fun to see because these guys have a lot of athleticism, and Singleton, especially with the speed. But as they get older and they get bigger and stronger and they start to acquire that toughness, and that's going to be fun to watch. Allen's, can't remember if it was his first touchdown run or his second touchdown run, but he had bounced it. He kind of maybe ill-advisedly bounced it outside, and there was an edge defender that met him basically at the line of scrimmage, and Allen just put his head down and basically bowled the guy over and then walked in for a touchdown. And it's nice to see when these high level speed athleticism guys also have a degree of toughness, because I think you gotta have both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was his second one. And Orlovsky really pointed that out quickly about makes a cut at the line of scrimmage, is able to hit the acceleration and go through a safety. And that's all the things you need, especially out of a true freshman running back.
Yeah,
I think that was what made that even more impressive. Is we hoped that Singleton and Allen would be able to contribute right away. I don't know if we thought that this is what they would be able to bring us. And before we transition to Orlovsky and a couple of things we want to talk about there, I think it's worth noting that we scored 6 touchdowns today. all 6 from true freshmen. Kaytron Allen had 3, Nick Singleton had 1, and Drew Aller had 2 passing touchdowns. I don't necessarily want to go too deep into the Clifford versus Aller thing, but our third talking point has to be Orlovsky's comments when he said, quote, "The difference between Penn State and Ohio State is that Penn State hasn't had a dude at quarterback." Zach, our Clifford supporter and apologetic Clifford supporter, I guess sometimes. How do you feel about those comments? Do you agree with it? Are we one quarter? I can't even say it without laughing. Are we one quarterback away from being a top 4 college football team year in and year out?
So if you've watched this podcast at all before, you will not be surprised that my answer is no, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you go back to, so forget about Clifford for a second, and we'll even look at Penn State's, what I think is their peak, 2016 to 2019. Clifford was the starter, and he was the first-year starter in 19, wasn't asked to do a ton. So we'll look at 2016, 2017, 2018. I think it's pretty clear that McSorley was JT Barrett's equal in all of those games.
Yep.
And we were outmatched at a number of positions in those games. I think if Orlovsky was just looking at the Ohio State game last week in a vacuum and said, look, CJ Stroud had no turnovers, made no mistakes, made all the throws he needed to make, and Clifford had 4 turnovers that he had played a role in. I get it. It's very easy at the surface level to just say, flip the quarterbacks in that game and Penn State wins. Maybe not. But it ignores all other evidence across the field, where they have players like Marvin Harrison Jr., who we just, in some cases, just refused to cover, in other cases couldn't cover. And then a guy like JT Tuamaloa, not to rehash old wounds, but like we don't have a guy like that. We just don't. There's nobody in his league. Probably nobody even in Zach Harrison's league. And if you go back over the years of the Ohio State Penn State games, we didn't have a Chase Young. We didn't have. You could rattle off a bunch of offensive linemen that are playing in the NFL right now. We didn't have those guys. You know, they've had wide receiver rooms in the past where Terry McLaurin, who's a number 1 wide receiver for the Redskins or for the Commanders, you know, he was like in 2016, he was like their number 3 or 4 wide receiver. So I have to completely disagree with him. I would love to be wrong and we go into the shoe next year and Drew Aller leads Penn State to victory. I will say I was wrong, but I just don't think. I think it's a bit dismissive too of the unreal success that Ohio State has had in the last 10 years. I think it would be like if you were Ole Miss or A&M or somebody in the SEC that was like, we are just a quarterback away from being Bama. Like, think about how stupid that would sound if that was LSU or like LSU is a great example, right? The one year that LSU was Bama, they had an obscene amount of their entire offense is starting in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
And when they haven't had that, they haven't beat Bama. And so
somebody's going to say, "Oh, well, they had Joe Burrow, so they were one quarterback away." But they
were also
disregarding all the other,
and across the board, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I'm sure some of those offensive linemen are playing the NFL, and so it's just not only is it, I think, incorrect. I think it's just it's flippantly dismissive of, like, Ohio State has lost like 5 Big Ten games in the last like 10 years.
Yeah,
if the point was with a better quarterback, Penn State can maybe get closer to that level. Yeah, sure. I mean, we can be better at quarterback. I think even in the McSorley era, he was a great gutsy leader. Everybody loves him. I mean, I don't think he was ever elite or one of the top quarterbacks in the country. So sure, with better quarterback play, we could be better. But the idea that if we get the number 1, if we had gotten Justin Fields, who people forget was initially committed to Penn State,
and he did bring that up at least, so
that somehow we would have gone like 3 years with Justin Fields and lost like 2 games in the playoffs and swept the Big Ten. I don't think he would have glossed over the shortcomings that we had across the board relative to the Ohio States and Michigan. So that's all I'll say to it. I like Orlovsky. Actually, I think he's very well informed and is a knowledgeable football junkie, but he's also he's a semi hot take artist. He works for ESPN and he's on one of those talking head shows in the morning. So he kind of has to be well versed at throwing out hot takes. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much with you, and I'll keep mine really short too here. Obviously, I want Drew Aller starting. He should have started today. But we are not one quarterback away from being the best team in the Big Ten. So if we're not even the best team in the Big Ten, definitely not the best team in the nation. I think what Orlovsky was trying to say, and like you said, he's trying to make a hot take, I'm sure. And I'm with you. I think Orlovsky might be my favorite color guy right now. Other than I still like Herb Street a lot. I know a lot of people don't, but I really like Herb Street. Anyways, off topic. I think what he was trying to say was this whole expanded college football playoff of like Penn State is in that position where realistically, with them being at 12 teams, Penn State is the college football playoff every single year. And I think that's kind of what he was saying, but didn't say it articulately as far as is Penn State one quarterback away from being in the college football playoff every year when it expands? But I think the way he said it made it seem like right now, like this year, we were one quarterback away from being 9-0 right now instead of 7-2. Hopefully that's how he meant it. Because if he did, I kind of agree with him. With all of our shortcomings, I still think we're a top 15 team, as evident by the college football rankings this week. We're still a top 15 team, so we've got to find a way to get into the top 12 every year. I think anything less than a college football playoff when it expands to 12 will be a disappointing season. So I guess I kind of agree with it in that sense if I'm interpreting it the way that I think he meant it to be interpreted. I don't know.
Yeah,
Also,
they were talking
12 teams, so it's kind of another fight for another day, I guess.
Yeah, and they did bring up. I think they were kind of discussing the quarterback situation and the potential expansion, because a number of times they brought up the graphic of past years and where they finished in the top in the rankings, and I think 4 years. If the college football playoff had expanded to 12 in 2014 when it was first created, I think there's 4 years where Penn State would have made it.
Right.
But I still think that, and it'll be interesting once it happens. I kind of feel bad for Franklin in a little regards, where I think we will make it a good many years, but unless you close that gap to the Ohio State, Michigans, and Georgias and
Exactly.
Alabamas, you're going to lose to them. And the championship game is going to be one of the top four, a couple of the top four teams. And I liken it to the NCAA tournament where, look at all the Big Ten teams in college basketball who have really good regular seasons all the time. Michigan State, Purdue, especially Michigan State and Purdue, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and nobody wins the Big Ten. Nobody wins a national title. And in recent years, they're not even making the Final Four. And tell me if you think their fan bases are happy getting knocked out in the Sweet 16 every year, because they can say, oh, we're on the national stage and people view us as we're always in the Sweet 16. I don't think they're happy. So I think if Franklin made the playoffs 4 years in a row and we finished somewhere between 5 and 12, where we had to play the quarterfinal game and we lost every time, the comment sections and the message boards are going to be blowing up, hating him just as much. So I think they're right that making the playoffs will be a positive perception thing, but there'll still come a point in time where the fans are like, okay, we made it, but we also want to win while we're here.
Right. And I mean, like I said, without us going too deep down here, it's like you said about college basketball. Obviously, Coach Deven right there is all about matchups are so much easier in college basketball. And that's why 68 teams doesn't bother me in the college basketball playoffs. But 12 teams, the good teams are still going to win. There's upsets, but upsets in December and January are few and far between. Upsets in college football are usually in September, October, when it's still early in the year. So I'm with you. Hopefully we make the playoff every year when it goes to 12. Hopefully Drew Aller leads us to a Heisman and national championship in 2 years. I'm also trying not to get too hyped because Aller definitely is flawed. And I saw that again today, is that he did a lot of really good things, but he did a lot of overthrows. And one of our clickbait titles, for those of you who have clicked on this video, it's going to be fun seeing him and Clifford team up for the next few years. Just the Clifford with an L instead of an S. So I guess our last thing here, and this is probably the most important thing that we'll talk about all day while we're on the Orlovsky topic. How do you feel about his comments on Reese's peanut butter cups?
So he's dead wrong. He's dead wrong.
Agreed.
Reese's peanut butter cups are great. I think he said he's not even a milk chocolate fan. I think he only
what's wrong with
like
him?
dark chocolate. I actually don't really eat much chocolate unless it comes with peanut butter. You got to have the peanut butter combo. So he did a good job today. Called a good game. I like Orlovsky, but he just couldn't be more wrong on that take.
I'm with you. Totally with you. And I think that's the perfect way to end this.
Let us know in the comment section if you think I'm right or if Orlovsky's right.
Yeah, because we know who's right, and it's not Orlovsky. So, well, Zach, appreciate it. Again, we would love to have Jordan on here. Big time difference, so he's probably currently sleeping. Actually, he might be awake right now. But hopefully we'll be back this week. Just as an update to everybody on the channel, we might downsize our podcast a little bit, especially moving forward here. Basketball starts up for me pretty heavy this week, so we might not have our full hour-long recaps every week over the next few weeks. But we appreciate all 250 of you or however many we're up to now. And like I said, we've got to call out Duncan and Blizzard. Let us know that we didn't know what we were talking about on Indiana again, because we did pretty much talk about Bazalik and Cam Camper and Cam Jones. Cam Camper, I fully think that he was not announced out until Tuesday, whenever we record on Mondays, usually, sometimes even on Sundays. So other than that, we're pretty off. But I don't know if anyone knew that Tuttle was going to start. So anyways, just to give that little update to everybody that we might not have 3 episodes a week. We might be down to 2, but we'll see how it goes, see how much free time we have and what Jordan's able to do. But Zach, any last comments, or are we good?
The last thing I'll say is I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that Brenton Strange catch.
Oh, it was so strange.
It's such a strange catch, but it was also an amazing catch. And it was nice to see. He's had a really good year, and especially early on, and then he kind of tapered off a little bit. Just nice to see him make an awesome play like that. And
yeah, he had another good game. He whiffed on that one block on where Allen should have scored, but Singleton pulled and got a really good block. Allen got stopped short, and then Singleton scored on the next play, so kind of got rewarded there. That was Strange, could have had a better block there, but he made a couple nice catches, a couple of really good blocks down the field later in the game. So I'm with you. That catch probably be a number 1 play tomorrow, at least top 3 or 4 on SportsCenter, I would assume. Penn State's the only game I watched today. I didn't even watch Georgia, Tennessee, so because it looked ugly, just like ours. So anyways, I think that'll wrap it up. We'll be back with some more information coming forward. So thanks, Nittany No Huddle Nation. Talk to you later.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.